about in the diaspora, this idea of decolonization, apartheid, genocide, is dangerous and false. And we know you're going to share with us that this does not at all describe the foundation of Israel, what Israel was founded on, and the tragedy of the Palestinians. The Hamas attack of October 7th resembled a medieval Mongol raid. Slaughter and human trophies were taken, except that it was recorded in real time and uploaded to social media. Yet since October 7th, academics, students, artists, activists have denied, excused, and sadly celebrated the murders of the terrorist sect itself, who is the one who is committed to genocide. The world is upside down. Some of this is happening out in the open, behind humanitarian and justice names, and most famously, the phrase "from the river to the sea" implicitly endorses the killing and or deportation of 9 million Israelis. Here in the US, we like to have a plan. We like to have a solution. We like to have a fix. And the West and our leaders see this problem as political and territorial in nature. But it's really not. Because for Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and their sponsor, it is really a religious problem. At its heart, this annihilationist fantasy of ending the Jewish state by killing as many Jews as possible is very clearly spelled out in the 1988 Charter of Hamas. It's not a two-state solution, which has been offered over and over again, right? It's a one-state genocidal plan. But what has struck us about you, Lyana, is your optimism. And you come with us with this incredible message, B'yachad Ninatzeach, together we will win, and that there really is this before and after. So tell us.
So thank you, Wendy. Thank you all. I'm actually going to stand up. I don't do so well sitting. So thank you all, first of all, for being here. Thank you for coming to hear a hopefully slightly different perspective from what it is that you guys are used to. And yes, Wendy, I am an eternal optimist. What can I tell you? Post-October 7th, when most of the people around me were like down in the dredges and totally depressed, I chose to look at things very, very differently. And I think 4 months later, 121 days into the war, you're seeing a very different Israel. You're seeing a very different response, and certainly a different response from what our enemies anticipated when they attacked us on October 7th. But, hey Gio. Oh, sorry, there we go. This is where I've come from, okay? This is Kfar Aza. And Wendy, as you aptly described, we're dealing with a genocidal, jihadist, annihilation ideology. It's not just a religious ideology. We are dealing with a concept of dehumanization of Jews, seeing us not as humans, but basically as targets that need to be eradicated, destroyed, burnt alive, dismembered. And I don't have to go into the details because you all know what I'm talking about. And this is a picture not from October 7th. This is a picture from 2 weeks ago when I was in Kfar Aza. And the reason that I start with this is because this is what I've come from. And yet, despite of what I've come from, one would expect that we are all hunkered down and that we are in our bunkers and that we're not living and we're not breathing, which we weren't for a while. But in fact, Israel is at a very, very different place. And I would actually argue, as Jill said, that when you come to Israel and you experience Israel and you feel what it is that we are feeling, that you will in fact come back inspired, you will come back resilient, you will come back with a sense of purpose, and you'll see that the way we are portrayed is very, very different from what in fact is happening on the ground. So while this is devastating, this is horrible, and anybody who can, on any level, endorse this sort of behavior needs not only a reality check, but a moral compass check. Israel has chosen to rise from this and to do what is necessary, not just for Israel, but for the world. And I just want to say that when we talk about certain events in history, the world of before and the world of after are very, very different worlds. And before we talk about October 7th, which is right up there, we do need to be reminded of a few other events in our history that have transformed us and have transformed the world. So if I take you all the way back to the beginning, right? not Bereshit when we create the world, but a little bit after that. But not so far after that, right? We become a people, we establish our own independent kingdom in the land of Israel, and then the Babylonians come and destroy the first temple, and we are exiled for the first time. And the Jewish world of before and the Jewish world of after are a very different world. And in fact, many of the traditions that we follow today began in Babylon and continue to this day. But beyond that, even when we return, one of the major events is the destruction of the second temple. And it's not just the building that is destroyed, but it's the people. Imagine what it was for a temple-based religion to figure out a way to come back from that and not basically disappear, because in fact you couldn't be Jewish if there was no temple. But yet we are exiled. It's not diaspora because we were kicked out. It wasn't by choice. And for 2,000 years we are wandering the world, and we are figuring out a way to retain our Jewish identity, retain our Jewish tradition, climb out from the very, very dark space that we were on the verge of, and not only the verge of, but in the midst of a civil war where baseless, false hatred is what ultimately led to the destruction of the temple and almost the destruction of the Jewish people. And so we as a people are transformed. You jump forward in history to the Inquisition and to the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, and the world of before and the world of after, very, very different world. And the Jewish people are very, very different people. So we're sitting in a shul, all right? And if any of you have gone to shul on Friday night, whenever it is that you go, the name of the service that we do on Friday night is called, what's it called? Kabbalat Shabbat. It's not a trick question. Kabbalat Shabbat. It's okay. Okay, I like to engage the public. You can see that. Okay, it's called Kabbalat Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat begins after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, when the Jews are trying to basically regroup and refigure out how to be Jewish and how to make Jewish fun and sexy and engaging again. All right, Tikkun Olam, which is one of our basic values, is born on the destruction of, or the attempt of the destruction of Spanish Jewry. And everything that we do today is totally connected to that. Of course, the Holocaust is a pivotal moment in our history and in world history, because the world of before and the world of after are not the same world. And with that is also October 7th. So the world of before, and October 7th is not just a Jewish issue, October 7th is not just an Israeli issue, October 7th is a global issue. So let's just remember for a second, as Wendy said, what it is that the State of Israel was established on. Because in spite of the Holocaust, and not because of the Holocaust, the State of Israel was established. And when we were established in order to be a safe haven to the Jews, so that we would not be murdered again. Did you hear what I said? We would not be murdered again. And what happened on October 7th? We were murdered in our own country, meaning that the not post, but the perpetual trauma of that is still ongoing. So what you're seeing here is Lyana Rotstein, who we'll talk about after him. He's one of the stars of Fauda, sitting with Rabbi Meir Lau, who is a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a song about Rabbi Lau's experience. But what I just want to share with you quickly is that after Rabbi Lau sees his father, he was 5 years old, sees his father being beaten by the Nazis because he refused to cut his sidewalks, and they're then put on a train and they're sent to Buchenwald, he and his brother, Naftali. They get to Buchenwald, Naftali says, we have no father, we have no mother, and I'm going, and I don't know if we're going to survive. But if by some miracle we survive, or you survive, okay, this is a 5-year-old child, I want you to remember there's only one place to go. Eretz Israel, right? He says, repeat after me, Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Why? Because it's our home, and they do not kill Jews there. This is our home, all right? And so October 7th doesn't defy that, but certainly puts into question that when we think about how is it that the place that was supposed to protect us for the first 8 hours on October 7th was not there. So one would expect, right, that you just sort of flick us away, and we're going to lie down and die, and they're going to invade from the 27 areas that they did, and they're going to push us into the sea, and that's going to be it. What's amazing is the exact opposite happened. So I want you to look, I just updated this morning. Okay, this is what happens every time. Two more soldiers were killed over the weekend. But I want you to understand, when we talk about October 7th, and we talk about the entry, the invasion, it's not a terror attack. This was an army of terrorists and civilians who entered with maps, with all the knowledge that they had, assisted by people that we had given work permits to come in and work, because we thought that if we gave them work, and they all had reason to wake up in the morning, life would be hunky-dory, maybe we'd say kumbaya in the end. Of course, that didn't happen. But these people enabled the horrific massacre that you saw. And so every morning, When I open the news, I dread to see the two words that are the worst words ever, and that is hutar l'pirsum, which means it's been allowed to be announced. And whilst in normative times that might mean that something that was clandestine and you can't divulge the details of some, trial or whatever, that means that new names are going to be announced. And over the weekend, 2 new names were announced. And the price keeps going up in terms of human life. Look how many soldiers, 240 hostages, look how many missiles. And I just want you to get a sense of what that means if this attack happened in the United States. Okay, so I'll move the chair so that you can all see. What that basically means that October 7th, if it happened here in America, would mean that you would have had close to 9,000 people kidnapped, and you would have had 52,400 people murdered, and 309,271 people injured, and close to 4.3 million rockets raining down on all of your population centers. And when you understand that, then you begin to understand that October 7th is a war. It is not a terror attack. It's got nothing to do with where the borders are going to be drawn. It has to do with whether or not Israel is going to exist at all. Okay, and what's important to understand here is that this picture that you see is a picture of a reservist who found this map in a civilian's house, not a terrorist house, somebody who's theoretically unrelated. And what that map basically shows you is, of course, it's in Arabic because it was found in Gaza, but the names on this map, there is no Tel Aviv, there is no Haifa, there is no Kfar Saba, there's no Modi'in, because the names on this map are basically the names of the cities and towns as they were pre-1948. And so the war of October 7th is not a war about a 2-state solution. It's not a war about whether we can share this land. It is a war of whether or not we can exist at all. And whether or not anywhere between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, and those who chant to at least know their geography, whether or not we can be there at all. Okay? And that is what leads to this. When you are a genocidal, dehumanizing, jihadist ideology, where all of the people in this room, Jewish and Christian, if there are any non-Jews in this room, everybody falls under the same banner, because there is no right for people who do not think like them to exist at all. And then you get that. And then you get that. 1,400 people massacred, murdered, dismembered, burnt alive, cooked in their ovens, and everything else on that day. So what is the answer? This is a graffiti that I saw in Jerusalem, and is for me the be-all and end-all. It is not about right or left. It is not about yes, judicial reform, no judicial reform. Yes, I like Bibi, no, I don't like Bibi. It's not about that anymore. It is all about whether we are going to be with the forces of light and good, or whether we are going to side with the forces of evil and darkness. And so, if I share with you very quickly just a couple of stories that highlight what I'm talking about. This is Kfar Aza. This is the young people's neighborhood on October 7th at 6:30 in the morning when that massive attack comes in. People have to make choices. Netta Epstein, 23 years old, the age of my daughter, is living in one of these houses. They're hiding in their safe room. They hear the terrorists coming in. The terrorist throws in a grenade, and Netta throws it out. He throws it in again, Netta throws it out. The third time he throws it in, Netta says, okay, I can't keep doing this ping pong. I have to make a decision. How am I going to save myself and or my girlfriend? And he jumps on the grenade. He jumps on the grenade and sacrifices his own life for his girlfriend. And his girlfriend, in order to survive when the terrorists come in, pulls his body onto her and hides under his body so that they will not find her, and this is how she survives. This is not a 53-year-old person. This is a 23-year-old person who understands what it is that they're doing and is willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice to survive. This is Sderot. Sderot is very, very close to the Gaza border. Sderot was invaded with an army of terrorists, and they take over the police station, which was strategically located, and try to make their way up onto the roof to sniper anybody trying to stop the attack. And it is the heroism of the men and women in the police station trying to shoot and kill the terrorists to prevent them from being able to take over the city. It took 18 hours to ultimately take over and destroy the building, so that all that is left today is an empty lot and a memorial to the heroism of the men and women who risked their lives in order to stop the terrorists so that Sderot would in fact be saved. And the last quick story I want to share with you, because of where it happened, is the city of Ofakim. Ofakim, it takes 30 minutes to drive from the Gaza border into Ofakim. I'm going to say that again. It takes 30 minutes to drive from the Gaza border to Ofakim. Terrorists drove for 30 minutes, undisturbed, into the heart of one of our cities and took over a neighborhood and basically took over houses and attacked the population. Why am I stressing that? Because we, for the first 8 hours, did not have an active military that was doing anything. Everything was in mayhem. And yet individuals risked their lives in order to protect the people. And so Yigal very quickly goes first to try to save the kids at the music festival, comes back to the city, enters the neighborhood. As he's coming in, this is how he's coming in. This house is on this side. There's a house where you're sitting. He has his gear. He says to the people, come behind me. I'm protected. And then a terrorist from that top window shoots him here and kills him on the spot. But by doing that, the others realized what was going on and were ultimately able to save the neighborhood. And who lived in this house? An older woman by the name of Rachel, who I have no idea where she had the wherewithal, but as the terrorists come into her house, she offers them what's on your table. She says, come, you must be really tired. You must be really hungry. And she makes them tea, and she gives them chocolate chip cookies, and brownies, and water. And for 18 hours, she's keeping these people busy with her famous Rachel's chocolate chip cookies. And eventually, her son saves her. And this is how she's portrayed in Israel. This is the resilience of Israel. We don't lay down and die. We create art, and we tell the stories, and we talk about these amazing men and women. And so, when I started with the Yachad Nenatzech, one would say on October 7th, we could have said, oh my God, everything's horrible. How are we going to survive? This is beyond. Or you can do this. And you say, united in the home front means that we will win in the front lines. We are strong in the home front. We are strong in the front lines. We are united. We are together. And that's what we're going to focus on, the resilience and the incredible 180-degree shift that happened in Israel.
Right, so thank you, Lyana, for that. And before we go into having you tell us about really what was going on in Israel, right before the divisiveness, I just want to remind all of us that image that Lyana showed of the map, right, with all the communities. 20 plus communities, these were the most left-wing of all Israelis. They were the most peace-loving, they were demanding peace. They were in fact, picking up these, I think, 15,000 plus Gazans who had work visas to come into Israel and to work. Their lives were, they were helping them, taking them to doctor's appointments. And so people say, well, why would you live there? Why would anyone want to live there? Well, remember, these were kibbutzim and cities that were founded many, many years ago, before there was a wall, before there was a fence. And Israelis used to go to the beach in Gaza. Gazans would come in and work freely, and they shared holidays, and there was this whole peace between the two until, as we know, 2005, when Israel handed the keys to Gazans and the PLO were overthrown by Hamas, and Lyana's going to talk all about that. But I just wanted to, again, talk about, before you talk about the divisiveness, that the belief that we have in the West and that a lot of people have, getting back to this territorial thing, is that we believe that on the other side, or we hope, or we thought, or we fantasize, that on the other side of the table, right, Lyana, there would be a Palestinian leadership who would in fact reciprocate with peace to territorial withdrawal, right? And if you believe that the leadership is going to hold their end of the bargain, then you believe that territorial withdrawal is worthwhile, ceasefire is worthwhile, and ending the conflict is worthwhile. That's what you believe. But what actually happened was that these, unfortunately, I'm not saying everybody, but many, right, thousands, if there were 15,000 people coming in, they were actually the sources of intelligence for Hamas. There is this unbelievable sense of betrayal right now by everybody. Even the most left-wing people are saying, no, we're done. That this belief in trying to have a two-state solution has literally been burned to the ground. And I want you to talk, Lyana, just about what we saw here, the rallies and the marches and the divisiveness in Israel. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, Like, we have survived thousands of years and now we're gonna destroy ourselves from inside. Tell us about kind of that.
Okay, so here's an image that hopefully will help bring that home to you. Many of you, I'm sure, were following for a long time what was happening in Israel. You know, we had many, many elections, unfortunately. We had 5 elections in 2 years. That's a record, I think. Very hard to form a government. And when eventually a government was formed, not everybody was happy with the government that was formed. There were many feelings that the members in the government were quite radical. They were not necessarily representing what Israel really wanted. And you began to see, week after week, many, many people coming out and demonstrating against the government, for the judicial reform, and then those against the judicial reform. And basically you had hundreds of thousands of people coming out, and the language was extremely, extremely violent. And the atmosphere was extremely violent. And it comes to a head with this image here that I brought, because if this were not in Israel, you would all say this is an anti-Semitic image. But what you're seeing here is the eve of Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish year, in a central square in Tel Aviv, where for years they have been having public prayers in the public sphere, and yet you have secular Israelis attacking, antagonizing, shouting, disrupting religious Jews as they are trying to pray on the eve of Yom Kippur. Now we can debate whether or not that was good or whether or not that was bad, whether they had the right to or not, but the fact that this happens tells you where we were. Because on Yom Kippur, I should remind you that the only way that God is going to forgive you is if you first ask forgiveness of your fellow person. Because we don't live with him, we live with us. And so for this to happen on the eve of Yom Kippur, this was a very big warning sign of where were we? What was going on? Maps were being drawn of the country of Israel, the more liberal, enlightened, as they saw themselves, and the country of Judah, the extremist, messianic, settlers, and they were talking about dividing the country. We were on the cusp of a civil war. The demonstrations were everywhere. The flag was being used by both sides. This is down the street from my house. This is the house of the Minister of Justice, Yariv. Every week, bullhorns and shouting and screaming. The neighbors were ready to tear their hair out and some wanted to move because they couldn't deal with it anymore. Language like Yariv Levin, the enemy of the state. That is where we were at. That is the type of atmosphere. Remember I said destruction of the Second Temple? Hatred for no reason? That's where we were. And this is what the enemy saw. And they said, wow, Israel's crumbling from within. This is the time. Because they will not stand together, and we just need to, as I said, flick them. And everything will come toppling down. But you know what? That's not what happened. Because this is the square outside of Yariv Levin's house. And what you see today is this, where we stand, in solidarity to bring home the hostages. And what's even more amazing, this is one of the most famous images of the days before. I talk about language of October 6th and language of October 7th. So October 6th, you have both sides using the flag, each one for their own purpose. So the flag, rather than being unifying, was also dividing. And then you have this. This is an image down the street from my house a few days after October 7th. And I want to share with you very quickly where I was on October 7th so that you understand from our perspective how transformative this was and how totally different it was from what people expected it to be. So October 7th is Simchat Torah. It happened to be a Saturday, but it doesn't matter because it's a holiday. And in Israel, Simchat Torah is the end of the month of jubilation and celebration of the Jewish holidays. I know many people here think of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. In Israel, we celebrate all but at the end of Sukkot. There's no life until after Sukkot. You can't close a business deal. You can't do anything. It's all acharei hachagim, after the holidays. And the happiest day is Simchat Torah, where everybody's out in the streets and they're singing and they're dancing with the Torah. And services go on until you want to tear your hair out already because it's 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's a very happy day. So I wake up in the morning. I'm observant. Okay, I don't turn on my phone on Shabbat and I don't turn on the TV on Shabbat. And I wake up in the morning and I'm getting dressed to go to synagogue, and all of a sudden I hear boom, 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 And I'm not quite sure what that boom is, but it registers in the back of my mind. It sounds like the interception of the Iron Dome. I say, no, can that be? Simchat Torah? No, that's not possible. And I'm getting dressed, and it keeps going. And it keeps going. And I say, so there's an interception of the Iron Dome. What's going on? And I go up, the streets are empty. There is nobody on the streets. It's like death rolled over. There's nobody to talk to, there's nobody to find out. And a couple of people that are walking are rushing so fast you can't even stop them. I go to a women's prayer group first, and I get there's like a handful of women. They go through the cycle and they say, due to the situation, we're cutting the services short. And I'm like, what's going on? What's the situation? I have no idea. This is 9 o'clock in the morning, okay? I have no idea what's going on. They say, what? You haven't heard? There's been an attack, there's been an invasion, there's people killed, there's terrorists in, people are getting called up. Okay, so I go to my synagogue, and usually, as I say, we're praying till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're already almost finished with the Torah service. And as I come in, I see somebody getting knocked on the shoulder, tapped on the shoulder. He puts everything down, and he walks out. And then the person that replaces him, 2 minutes later, his pager goes off because he's in the security forces, and he walks out. It becomes very clear that we're dealing with something totally different. And we're rushing. By 10:30, I'm home. We're trying to figure out what's going on, and at 11 o'clock, there's a siren. And we all go into our safe room, and we're beginning to understand that this is not just something in the south, but it's something much bigger. After 10 minutes, when we come out of our safe room, our neighbor's son is in uniform. He's getting in his car, and he's driving off. 10 minutes later, our neighbor, he's in uniform. He's on his phone. Okay, things are like beginning to be very uncomfortable, and we're not breathing. We're not breathing. And we're all living off of, tidbits of information. And when Shabbat comes out, and we turn on our phones, and we turn on our television, it's like, like you get punched in the stomach, and like your breath cannot, it's like this. You can't talk, and you don't understand, like, how could this be? How could this happen? What is going on? Where was the government? Where was the army? How could any of this? And then I remember calling my cousin who lives in a kibbutz down south right next to one of the army bases that was attacked. She lives in kibbutz Karmiya. And she says to me, Lyana, I'm fine. I evacuated myself with my kids to my mother's house. She said, thank God I did it at night, so my kids couldn't see the cars that were burnt, and the bodies that were burnt, and the bodies that were laying on the street. And 2 days later, I get a phone call from her mother who says to me, how do you feel about getting refugees? I say, okay. So her mother comes to me, her daughter who's special needs comes to me, her grandson who's special needs comes to me, and for 3 weeks, I have them in my house. Because whilst their community was not invaded, everything around them was in total, it was noisy, the rockets were flying, and the Iron Dome was flying, and it was just not functioning. And that's where we were at. So what do you see here? You see here, we're starting to, we don't have time to mourn. We don't have time to identify who the people are. So many of the bodies were in such terrible condition that they could not be identified. And it took days. Some of them took weeks before they could even be identified. And because there are rockets and missiles that are being shot, and we want to go and want to pay our respects to the dead, to the funerals, we can't go. Because you can't congregate so many people. What if all of a sudden there's a missile attack? And so, spontaneously, there were messages going out. Modi'in, unfortunately, had a lot of people who were killed. Messages are going out, and people come out with their flags. And they stand on the street, and they're saluting as the cars go by in order to show our respect. So remember the picture I showed you before, what the flags were used for on October 6th? That's not where we are anymore. This is now October 7th. And as we walk around the corner, because there were 2 funeral processions in 45 minutes in my neighborhood, and we had to walk from one to the other. My neighborhood has a lot of Anglos who moved there. I remember that there was a family behind me, and the child says to his mother, Ima, is today Yom HaAtzmaut, is today Independence Day? And I was thinking to myself, my God, she would answer, right? I didn't know what to answer. And I hear her saying, why? And he says, well, why are all the flags out? And she says, my darling, right now, every day is Independence Day. So I want you to feel as if you were with me there. This is 5 days, 6 days, this is Friday, after the war broke out. And this is the funeral procession. And then this happens. And so this is what happens. This is where we are post-October 7th. These signs are everywhere. I am obsessed with these signs. I take them everywhere. Because if you were in Israel on October 6th, you would not have seen this. This is what Israel wants now. Together, we will win on Israel Chai. It is on every single thing. This is the airport last week when I flew out. It is on every packaging. It is on every menu. It is on every coffee cup. It is on the cars. It's on your paper towels, on your toilet paper, on your chicken. It is on everything. I know it's funny, but you know what it means? It means that this is where we are. It means that when we say together we will win, it's not just a slogan. It means it is an all-encompassing feeling, and it came from the ground up, which is unbelievable.
I want to talk a little bit about the people, the reservists, who is there right now, because it's not just the soldiers who are currently in the IDF, it's this unbelievable return to the land. So the week after October 7th, every single flight to Israel was packed with young people and medium-aged people, right, reservists, from all over the world, from North America, from base camp at Mount Everest, like wherever you were in the world, you went running back to Israel. And Garry Kasparov, right, the famous Russian chess champion, tweeted, "Why are Putin's war in Ukraine and Israel's war in Gaza so similar?" The answer is, both of them fill up flights to Tel Aviv. When Israel faces an existential threat, the reaction is not to flee, but to return. And some of you might have heard the story about this man who went to JFK Airport and was standing at the LL counter at JFK Airport, and anyone who walked up to the counter to try to get on a flight, he bought their ticket and paid for it. Apparently $250,000 he spent to fill up a plane and all the duffel bags. And so there were pictures, I believe there were a few flights in the beginning where they let more people on the plane than seats. And there was a photograph I saw of people curled up in the galley in the kitchen area with a pillow, with a blanket, to get back to Israel. And what moved me so deeply is the devotion of these young men and women, these young people, these medium-aged people, to their nation and their place in history, and their claim without any bravado that they're willing to die in this war. And they are made of something different, right? They're dropping everything, and you're going to talk about the rock stars, the chefs, the hedge fund managers, the garbage men, the teachers, everybody who have dropped everything. And these were the people who, some of them, in the divisiveness images, the people who were opposing the judicial reform, who said, no, we're not showing up. Guess what? They all did, and then some. So talk about that, Lyana. Tell us about, some of these stories about the reservists.
Okay, so when October 7 happened, everybody felt that they just wanted to do. They wanted to join, they wanted to help, they wanted to fight, they wanted to do something. Now, I tell this story because to me it's just, my husband's 54 years old. My husband was a company commander in the paratroopers. He hasn't been in reserve for, 6 or 7 years. The poor man was calling every Tom, Dick, and Harry that he knew, begging them to find something for him to do. And I said, everyone, just forget it. You're 54, like, you're done. No. Don't you tell me I'm done. I will find something. And he wasn't alone. I mean, when we talk about the people who showed up, it wasn't 100%, it was 150%. All the pilots, all the reservists, everybody was showing up. And people who couldn't show up to fight were looking to do something else. The sense of, this is a now or never moment. This is a 1948 fighting for our survival. We all have to do what we can. And the incredible feeling was, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Right? So it's important to say that every single family in Israel was affected by this. Everybody knows someone, is connected to someone. My story of my cousin is not a unique story. Everybody knows someone who was killed. Everybody knows someone who was injured. Everybody knows someone who had to be evacuated. This is a sense of the extended family. And just like my husband, who did not get called up, no matter how hard he tried, my daughter, the older of my two daughters, I have 4 kids, my boys are my bookends and my daughters are my middle, so the older of the 2 daughters, Reut, when she was in the army, she actually was the commander of a war room on the border with Egypt. And when the war broke out, she said, Ima, if this had happened 2 years earlier, it would have been me. But you know what else she told me? That the war room in Nahal Oz, which was attacked, and all of them were burnt alive in that war room, the command of that war room was her soldier. She had recruited her and trained her. So when I say that everybody's affected, and we went to her funeral, and let me tell you, there were 1,000 people, 50 were allowed, there were 1,000 people there, and many more would have come. It is heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching. So she's sitting at home and she says, I can't just sit around not doing anything. There's no way that I'm not going to get myself. So she calls everybody that she knows. And after 3 weeks of calling and haggling and whatever, she's her mother's daughter, what can I tell you? She gets herself called up. But this is 3 weeks into the war. Okay, now I know she's not going to the front line. She's not going into Gaza. No one had gotten to Gaza at that point. But to see my daughter put on her uniform and to understand that she's going off to war and she's going to sit in a war room and the things that she's going to see and the things that she's going to experience and the information that is going to be at her fingertips long before any of us are going to know what's going on, that was very difficult for me. I was proud, don't get me wrong, but as a mother, to send her child off was not an easy thing. And how is my daughter going to get from Modi'in, which is here, to the north, which is here, when there's rockets and missiles and nobody's driving on the road and I'm not jumping in the car to take her? But when I said everybody wanted to join and everybody wanted to do, everybody did. So people who couldn't join and put their uniform on enlisted themselves in all support capabilities. So there was a group of people who got in their cars and decided they were going to volunteer to drive the soldiers to their bases and to pick them up from their bases and take them home. Nobody was paying them, nobody was covering their gas expense. This was their contribution to the war effort. And she calls this network, and this guy shows up, okay? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he says, I've been up since 5 in the morning. I live in Haifa. I've already driven down south all the way down to meet Ramon, and I've dropped off 3 different soldiers at 3 different bases. And when your daughter called, I said, well, I can't just leave her. I'm on my way home. So I came to pick her up, and I can't take her all the way, but I've already contacted somebody else who's going to meet me somewhere and is going to take her all the way up to the base. These are my people. This is what happened. But being a Jewish mother that I am, hearing that he was up from 5 in the morning, right? I said, well, you're not just going to go. And I went upstairs and I made coffee and I brought him chocolate chip cookies and I brought him brownies. And the guy was like so, bashful, like, what are you doing? I'm just doing what needs to be done. It was like not even a big deal to him. That is what was and still is going on in Israel. And part of what made me feel a little bit better is that my brother, who is still in reserve and is a medical officer in charge of many of the medical operations in the north, was there. And they were going to be together, and so I knew that at least there was somebody looking after her. I don't know, she also looked after him, so it was a little bit of a... but together with individuals like my family, you also have famous people who could have been exempt. because they are stars and because they are famous and because they could have been spokespeople, who dropped everything and said, this is our responsibility, these are our people, we are at war. And so Lyana Rotstein, who I mentioned before, who is one of the stars of Fauda, drops everything and enlists on October 7th, leaves his wife, leaves his daughter, and goes to war as a commander in an explosives unit in charge of blowing up the tunnels and blowing up the buildings after they have been cleared in order to destroy the infrastructure. And he posts an image saying, this is not a scene from Fauda. Like, this is real life. Don't be confused. I'm not acting now. I am in the war effort. He also left his unit because one of the other things that was going on, not in the first couple of weeks, but life goes on. Because if life doesn't go on, then terror wins. And so you had people in the army who were getting married and going back to serve right away in their units. I was involved in such an effort. So he left his unit to go and play at a wedding and went right back to fight. Now, one of the things that has been happening is that there are certain voices that are beginning to try to drown out this sense of unity, to drown out the sense of where we are. The people are not there. And so there is a campaign, this was, 90 days, but it's still going on. And the campaign of the reservists is basically, if you've got nothing good to say, if you've got nothing unifying to say, if you've got nothing positive to say, shut up. Tistemu. That's the campaign. So I want you just to hear his voice for a minute. And I have, I'll read it out to you, but just very quickly. All he says is that after 90 days, we're destroying all of the launch sites and all the command facilities. And basically, if you've got nothing positive to say, just basically shut up. Okay? Everyone? Tistemu etape. Okay? Like him, there are other amazing people that I'm just very quickly going to share with you because it's not just about the famous cooks and chefs and media people. This man, Shauli Greenberg, who's just your average person, basically wanted to be a singer. And he comes from the front line. This is where I need you. Right?
So this is the equivalent of the Israeli American Idol. And he goes in his uniform straight from the war to play, to sing.
I just want you to hear a few, just a little bit. Those are his parents. He comes in his uniform, he performs, his voice is amazing. 2 weeks, all right, you can. 2 weeks later, he falls in battle. And I can tell you that in Israel, anybody who hears this song today doesn't think about the original artist who performs it, it's only about Shauli. Okay, and so, can you just move it forward? And so, after they get up from Shiva, his family needs to sort of clear their head and they go down to a B&B down south. And when they go down to a B&B down south, basically, and just go to the next slide, I'll keep talking until he finds it, okay? And they're an observant family, and they need to say Kaddish, but it's an area where there's no people, no religious people there. So the daughter writes a quick Facebook post, and she says, we're coming down. And out of the woodwork, secular people come, and they come in order just to be there so that he can say Kaddish for his son who died in order to protect our country. And what basically happens is that the mother basically says, I was touched on so many levels, but the most important thing to me was people who didn't know Shauli who came and all they said was thank you. She said, I don't want to read the newspaper, I don't want to turn on the TV, I don't want all that white noise to destroy the feeling that I have of all of us standing together, because these are my people and this is who I draw strength from. And this is my best friend's brother, who was 39 years old. I made it for the first time I said was. It's been very difficult for me because it's only been a little over a month. But he was a tank commander. He could have been anything else. And he chose to stay in the tanks. He came home to move his family into a new house on a kibbutz, spent 3 days in the house, went back to war, and was killed in action. And now the family is to sit shiva on a new kibbutz, secular kibbutz, that they don't know anybody from Adam. And the family has religious people and secular people and ultra-Orthodox people, and you need to cook for them and organize for them. And this kibbutz went all out, contacted all the communities around. People started to cook and to bring food. They didn't even write their names. All they said was, with gratitude from the people of Israel. Because the sense of coming together and supporting is amazing. And in addition to the reservists, we have to remember the young soldiers as well in active duty who are fighting. When I said everybody's touched, this is only one of several of my friends' sons who have died in action. This was the first. Levi Lifshitz was a member of my synagogue, 20 years old, 3 weeks into the war. And this is what he says: "My life is not worth more than anyone else's." And this is what all of them are saying. We will die for our country. We are honored to die for our country. Do not be sad. Do not mourn. Be happy and live on, because this is what we are fighting for. And so our school is now named after him. He gave himself to the people of Israel and to the state of Israel.
So let's talk about kind of the medical situation, right? Let's talk about what's happening in Israel. And I know Lyana has coined this term, or you've mentioned this term. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder. It's perpetual, right? Traumatic stress disorder, because there was PTSD before. We saw it on our mission. We went to Sderot, and we saw, how PTSD has affected the kids, the dogs, right? Every time a siren goes off, what happens to these people? This was way before October 7th. And one of the things that I wanted all of us to think about was there was this, you literally can't wrap your brain around what happened. That the same way on 9/11, no one thought before 9/11, we didn't think anyone would hijack a plane and then actually fly it into a building as a bomb. We just didn't think of that. And then the firemen didn't really think the towers would come down, because otherwise why would they have set up everything at the, that there was the same failure of imagination. Unfortunately, in Israel, there were no locks on the safe room doors, right? Because no one thought that it was for an invasion, that it was only for the missiles. And if you remember during the Iraq War, when they were distributing gas masks, because there was a fear of a chemical attack on Israel by Iraq, the problem was you don't want to get locked into your safe room, so there were no locks on the door. So this is, this idea that, like, what else are we missing, or what else can happen, I know is contributing in a great deal to this traumatic stress disorder, and they did it on purpose, right? They're messing with our minds. They're with the GoPros and recording everything, and unfortunately recording this horrific murder of this grandmother on her phone, and then uploading it to her Facebook page from her phone of her being murdered, and that's how her family found out about it. So we also, we mourn every day the loss of those who have passed away, and we're grateful for those who so far are okay. But we also have to acknowledge the injured. And I know, Lyana, that you have spent time at Sheba Medical Center, Tel HaShomer, which has currently, I think, 2,000 injured there, which is not only soldiers, but hostages and other civilians. And also the incredible new Hadassah hospital that was not ready to be opened yet. It's still under construction. They opened it. They had to open it. Tell us how the medical community has been dealing with, all of these issues that have never been dealt with before in the numbers, right, in one day.
So, well, Israel is unfortunately very well prepared for mass casualty attacks, and we have done it for many, many, many years, dealing with terror attacks and everything else. The magnitude of the attack of October 7th, and not just the magnitude, but the numbers all coming at once, was huge. And yet, in spite of all of that, the hospitals were able to organize themselves and to accept not 200 people, but 500 and 600 people at a time. It took so long for people to be evacuated on October 7th because of the terrorists that were still roaming around. Many of the injured were eventually amputees because they had tourniquets, and there was not enough time to get them to the hospital to be able to save their limbs. And so on October 7th, the mass injuries are huge. Think of the fact that we had to open a war room in the Ministry of Health so that we could deal with all of these issues like mother's milk for babies, because mothers were killed and there was no way to feed the children, and women donating mother's milk to be able to feed. But how do you manage all of that? People in droves going to donate blood. People had to be turned away because there's only so many people that you could take blood from on a certain day, and the lines all the way around the block, okay? And many of the injured. So when you go to Sheba Hospital, this is what you see, right? Real heroes don't wear capes. But it's not just about what you see, because also at Hadassah, right, as Wendy pointed out, this is the most advanced rehabilitation center in not only the country, but in the world. One of the top medical facilities. And look at what it says, under construction, under construction, under construction. Notice that the signage is in Hebrew, English, and Arabic, because it's for everybody, okay? And because it's not yet finished, even in the elevators that are not yet paneled, the messages for the soldiers are very, very clear. Meaning that we had to regroup. We had to reroute, as we say, with ways. We had to get ourselves organized to be able to help our soldiers. And when we were there, Diane was with me actually when we were there, so it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable to see the spirit of these soldiers sitting there. It was like a whole big party, right? These are guys who fought together and now they're rehabilitating together, but they're not depressed and they're not talking about, oh my God, what happened to me? They're talking about get on with the program so we can get back to fighting with our unit. It's not about, oh my God, so great, I got a ticket out of the war. It's time is of the essence. Just get me back functioning so I can get back to doing what I need to do. Right? So many of us met many soldiers. Ro'id, who I met, his leg was shattered. And he was sitting, studying, preparing for his, next academic year, but what he really wanted was just to go back to fight. And this story I have to share with you because, the women, the mothers, the sisters, the girlfriends, they are the lionesses supporting the soldiers. So when I was there, I saw this amazing woman with her daughter and her granddaughter, and after playing with the baby, and I started asking her, so who's your son? And she said, Aviatar is my son, and I said, well, where does he serve? And she said, he's a paratrooper, and I said, oh, my husband was a paratrooper? What unit did he serve in? Oh, he's in Battalion 202. I said, that was my husband's unit. First of all, there was like this bond.
Lyana, excuse me for 1 second. We just got the 5 minute.
Okay, so I'm going to do it very fast.
So I just want to make sure we get through.
Yeah,
so we have time for
all right,
questions.
so very quickly, I would just say that she fought very hard and was able to save her son's leg. She refused to let him amputate his leg. She saved her son's leg, and he's now under rehabilitation, which is unbelievable. I'll just quickly end with this message, which is very, very important, and that is that Lyana Rotstein basically has said what we all feel, and that is that our mission as a nation is to stay united, not to fall apart, to prove to those who fell in defense that their sacrifice was not in vain, and although my body was injured, my spirit is strong, and I will go back not only to creating, but I will go back to fight for my country. Israelis are the strongest people in the world. When we are united, we are invincible. It will take time, but we will win this war because we have no choice.
So I just want to quickly talk a little bit about the volunteering. If you can go through those slides quickly, and then we'll get to the evacuees. I want you to hold up your thumb. So Lyana has a splint on her thumb because she herself did so much picking of vegetables. Now she has to try to immobilize her thumb. So yeah, but just quickly.
Very quickly. I'll just say that basically the idea was that because we all wanted to do something, we couldn't all be enlisted, and we don't all have ability to join the reserve. What we've done is we've supported reserve units, and even in supporting them, you've got religious and secular coming together to get them books and spiritual books and to buy them, the sleeping bags and the tents and everything in order to help them, because when you have 300,000 that are called up in one day, there's only so much that the Army can give them right away. And so the fact that we all got together, we got them coats. You don't have to hear, but they're basically thanking us for it. But the most amazing thing to me was that this unit that we helped, the day after they got the coats, they were lying and they were protecting the hostages that were being released in order to come home. And so part of that is everybody helps in any way that they can. So while I can't be sitting on the front line, I can enable those who are sitting in the front line to do the job that they are doing. And you see that we got these unbelievable thank yous. One other important thing that I want to say, because these initiatives are still going on, this was an empty lot in a major junction across the street from Ofakim that I mentioned before. And the day after the war starts, these two businessmen come down and say, we have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. We have to help them. So they are barbecuing 10,000 hamburgers a day. And they have people coming to give massages, and people to come and give haircuts, and people to come and give them pedicures, and all these other things that they need. Amongst them, my sister-in-law, who is a physical therapist, who goes down every week in order to treat the soldiers. But here's what's amazing about this picture, which she sent me last week. This is the chief Sephardi rabbi. The chief Sephardi rabbi has come down in order to bless them for their efforts, religious and secular, all coming together. We do challah bakes in memory of soldiers. This was in memory of my daughter's friend who was killed on October 7th, and in memory of my other daughter's friend's cousin who was killed in the Nova Festival. And when we send it to them and we get these messages, thank you, it was delicious. Thank you for giving us the support that we need. Thank you for bringing us the flavor of Shabbat. I've even done challah bakes on Zoom so that people on your side of the ocean can feel that they are part of what's going on, and then they go and cake bakes. I can tell you that in the Orthodox community, when you say we need cakes, that's mobilizing people for action. So within 12 hours, I had 100 cakes with all these amazing notes for the soldiers and all these amazing thank yous for bringing them the flavor and helping them. And this Jew?
No, let's jump ahead to the image of the evacuees.
No, I just want to say this.
Okay.
Just very quickly. I have to say this. Jill was there. I have to say very quickly. What?
You can go a little.
I can go a little bit longer. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. So one of the other amazing things that I have to share with you is this. This would not have happened on October 6th or any of the days leading up to that. What you have here is hundreds of thousands of people who came from all over the country to join in prayer at the Western Wall in order to pray for the safe return of the hostages. Many of the families are not religious families. We do have some who are, but the vast majority, because they come from the kibbutzim around the Gaza Strip, they are not religious. And the fact that they came and saw all of the chief rabbis standing there in unity, for once they were not squabbling with each other, and they were actually leading everyone in prayer in order to bring home safely the hostages. And when you spoke to the people there who said, how amazing is this? The people came together to support us. This feeling of prayer, this feeling of spirituality, this uplifting feeling of everybody being there, focused and united, is unbelievable. Now, the Western Wall is not just a religious site. It is, in fact, a national site. It's where we swear in our soldiers. It's where we have our annual Hanukkah lighting and our annual memorial service for the fallen soldiers. And so they put up 1,400 candles that are lit every day in memory of all those who fell, 1,400 symbolically for the 1,400 that were massacred on the first day of October 7th in perpetuity. And there are the names. And you can today scan because they keep updating the names. And so we all come and we light, you see even with my thumb I was able to light, right? But we are lighting the candles because that's who we are. We are a light unto the nations, and we will not be down in the drudges and the darkness. We are committed to bringing the light. We are committed to be resilient. We're committed to surviving, not just surviving, but to forging forward.
Amen.
Okay.
So I'll just end and you can say,
Just actually go to the next slide.
just go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay.
So I want you to talk about the evacuees, because we need to remember that there are 300,000 refugees in their own country, in Israel, and that Israel has offered many, many attempts at peace, and in fact, in 2003, this was the height of the peace talks under George Bush, when Arafat was offering everything. Two-state solution, half of Jerusalem, and in fact, at that time, what happened? There were 140 suicide bombings, and 1,000 Israelis were killed, when everything was being offered. So, the other thing that I want to mention about the evacuees who have now been in people's homes and in hotels is that Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah knows that many of these homes, most of them, they're all empty, they're still firing rockets to destroy the homes, to try to destroy the spirit of the people who are in Tel Aviv or wherever they are in a safe place. Their homes are still being destroyed. The other thing that I want you to talk about is that this sort of safe space, so there's this United Nations, or as someone calls it, the Useless Nations, 1701 resolution, right, that Hezbollah needed to stay north of the Litani River, right? In fact, no one, they're not, everyone's ignoring that, and of course no one in the world says anything. So, talk about this is a hotel, right? And I know, Lyana, we like to go on vacation sometimes, maybe not really, and we're in a hotel and it's fine and it's nice, but imagine being in a hotel room for 4 months, one room with your family.
So we have most of the hotels in Israel today have been taken over for the evacuees. And they try to keep them in communities, at least so there'll be a sense of community. But Wendy, as you've said, it is very traumatic. And when you come to a hotel and you don't have your privacy and you don't have your own space, and a hotel room is not built for an extended stay, where do you do your laundry? Where do you do your cooking? Where do you go for a 5-minute timeout and you just need to not be one on top of the other? Where do you do just to be able to have a little bit of breathing time? There is none of that. How do you reestablish an education system? Because the kids have to go back to school, right? What do you do with the young kids?
So this is the picture that always gets me. This is a pool, right? A little pool at a hotel that has been emptied out so the kids can play in it, like a sandbox.
So how do you deal with all of that, right? We tend to forget that. So it's not only the people from the south, it is also the people from the north. And in fact, the people from the north have said that because they do not want October 7th to happen to them, they are not going home. And they are not going home until the threat from Hezbollah is eradicated. And that is the message I think that I want you to take home. This is not a question of let's have a ceasefire, let's let them stay in power, let's work things out. Because when you allow these forces of evil to remain in power, and they tell you that October 7th is going to happen because they want to do it again, we tend to say, oh, they don't really mean it. Well, you know what? Our enemies tell us exactly what they want to do to us, and we should start to listen. And we should start to pay attention. The Nazis said already in January of 1939 that they wanted to annihilate the Jewish people, and nobody paid attention. Well, you know what? They followed through on it, and the world didn't listen. And so Hamas has said over and over again that they want to annihilate the Jewish people. So it's time to stand up and take notice, and it's time to have the world realize that whilst it's terrible what's happening in Gaza, the pointed finger is not to us. It's to the leadership, Hamas, that has absolutely no qualms in using their own population as human shields and basically as the backdrop so that everybody will feel sorry for them and putting them in harm's way. And that our evacuees are paying the price for that. In my community, we do laundry for them every week. My dryer is working overtime, and my washing machine is working overtime. And you know what? When you ask them what it is that they want, what it is that they miss most, they just want to be able to go and cook a home meal. And when my friend asked one of them, my friend said, so what do you want? And she says, my husband just wants the couscous. So she says, so what's the problem? Come to my house. And she opened her kitchen, and the woman came, and she cooked a pot of couscous and soup. And when her husband sat down at my friend's table in her kitchen and had that bowl of soup, he started to cry. Because the little things that we think of, that many of us don't want to do, oh my God, I have to cook dinner again? Oh my God, like really? Yeah, that's what I want. I want to be able to go back to my sense of normalcy, to be able to have a sense of going home. Okay? And that's why I'll just very quickly say that what it is that we want to breathe. We want to be able to just have a moment and not constantly be in a sense of like our guts are like wrenching every single time. When is it okay to go out into nature and to post a picture like this and not post all of my volunteer efforts and my war efforts and to say, you know what, I also can have a time out. But what does a time out mean? When you go, my friend goes on a hike in the desert and she sees a man with a bag with the pictures of all the hostages, and she asks him if he wants to join, and he slowly tells her a story that he's the grandfather of a grandson that was massacred on October 7th, and a granddaughter that was held hostage by Hamas, and that he is living in a hotel at the Dead Sea. And so a mundane hike of just wanting to breathe, not exactly breathing, or maybe it is breathing, because it was a sense for them to be able to, work through it and to hear a story. But in Israel, this is resilience, because he didn't lay down and die. He went out, he's rebuilding his life while still fighting. Today she's home already. But when this picture was taken, she was not. And so, can I quickly just run through this? I'll just quickly run through it. Okay, I'm really almost finished, I promise. Sorry. There's a lot to say. Yeah. So just very quickly, I'll say that these are the efforts that we were talking about. And remember that when we talk about the workers, the ties and everything, some of them were taken hostages. The king orders them home. There's nobody to work on the farms. We have people that are, in reserve. And so people like me, we're going and we're picking every week, every day. You have businesses that bring their people to volunteer for a day to help support, because you know what, if this isn't picked, we have nothing to eat. Not only do we have nothing to eat, the families have nothing to eat, because it's all rotting, right? And it's so important that when you go to the supermarket today, you have to mark whether or not the fruits and vegetables are from Israel or whether they're imported, so that I have the choice of who I want to support. Do I want to buy tomatoes from Jordan? I don't really want to buy tomatoes from Jordan. Do I want to buy, what do you call it?
Dried fruit
from Turkey? No, I don't really want to buy dried fruit from Turkey. But I need to be given that choice. And that's what's happening in Israel today. Am I just running through it? I'm just running through it. Okay, I'm running through it. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is language. Language is important. And there are certain words and there are certain associations that come to mind with various different things. You think about things in the Holocaust or terminology that is Holocaust related. Well, October 7th has the same thing. So you see yellow? Yellow is my favorite color. And yellow is usually a very, very happy color. In Israel, it's not such a happy color right now. You say yellow in Israel, and this is what you think about. You think about the hostages, right? They're everywhere. This is the museum in my city. Okay, it is everywhere. This is the train station in my city. There is a yellow chair, because until everybody comes home, we will not survive as a society if we do not bring them home. I want that to be very, very clear. But the question is not whether we bring them home, but how we bring them home and what the price is to bringing them home. So you don't have people campaigning for a total ceasefire. That's not happening in Israel. But there are those who say, let's have maybe a temporary ceasefire to bring them home. When you go to Hostage Square, right, and you know that famous table, it doesn't look like what you know anymore, because half of them have come home, but half of them are still held hostage. And that is part of what we need to remember. 136 people are still held hostage. We need to make sure that the world remembers that. And whilst things are bad in Gaza for the citizens of Gaza, things are also bad for our citizens who need to come home, because that's where they're being held. 370 something miles of tunnels under Gaza, more than the New York subway system, more than the London Underground, more than the metro in France. And we know that our hostages are there, because these are images that were found as they're being moved. And so part of the challenge is, how do you vanquish Hamas whilst you don't harm our hostages? So when you go to Hostage Square today, there's an installation that allows you to try to feel a little bit of what it is that we're talking about, to keep it front and center. You go and buy a cup of coffee, it's right there. You go to the foreign ministry, you go to every building, we don't forget them, right? We wear it, and we want the world to remember that yes, things are bad for them, but things are also bad, and worse, in fact, for us. So in that vein, what does orange mean? This is what orange means. Don't forget that the Bibas family, all redheads, are still held hostage. What does red mean? Well, red usually means nice, right? A nice glass of red wine? No, this is what red means. Darom Adom, red south. That's what it means, okay? But in fact, this is what Darom Adom means. It means the beautiful anemones that flower. And so the installation that was put in the Tel Aviv Museum is 240 plastic anemones for each one of the hostages. And what is happening now is that we want the south to flower again, and we want to bring the color back to the south. And it is. These are the flowers that are flowering, and this is what it's going to look like. This is the resilience that we are talking about. This is the amazing resilience of Israel. And so we're going to end with this. This is a song that has become the anthem in every household in Israel. We pray for the safe return of the hostages. We pray for the safe return of our soldiers. We pray for the healing of our injured. But this is what we want. In the song that was written before the war, the chorus basically says, also in the dark hours of night, there will always be a small star that will light your way home. It is always darkest before dawn. And I add, but then there's dawn. The dawn comes, and you have a choice of being in the dark, or you have a choice of waiting for when the light comes. This is where Israel is. We are not in the dark. We are actually in the dawn.
עוד יבואו ימים טובים, גם בשעות החשוכות של הלילה, תמיד יהיה כוכב קטן שיעיר לך את עצמך, את הדרך הביתה, תמיד זה הכי חשוב לפני סליחה. מיליון רכבות דורות הנוסטלגיה, מחפש רחוק את מה שנמצא לך מתחת לאף.
So, this slogan is the end. And why is it the end? I don't know how many of you know, but it brings us right back to the beginning. Because Am Israel-Hamas, which we all say, and we say it very, very proudly, as we should. This is not an age-old saying. This saying was coined for the first time when the camps were in fact freed by the Allied forces. And one of the Allied forces that came to one of the camps had a British rabbi. And when he saw the skeletal remains of people who were rising to greet them, what he said was, Am Israel Chai. I mean, how amazing is it that with everything that we went through, we are alive. And that saying was then taken by Shlomo Carlebach and was put to music and became really the anthem and the slogan of Free Soviet Jewry. And what we say before Am Yisrael Chai is that we say Od Avinu Chai. And he takes it from the story of Joseph. When Joseph meets his brothers, right, the first thing he asks them is, Ha'od Avi Chai, is my father still alive? And Shlomo Karlebach says, no, it's not my father, it's our father, Avinu Chai, because we are all descendants of Jacob. We are all the children of Israel. And so whilst Israel was established in spite of the Holocaust, and Israel was established to be a safe haven for the Jewish people, yes, Am Yisrael is Chai v'Kayam. We are here, and our father is still alive, and we are here, and we are resilient, and we will survive. And you know why? Because we have no choice. And what's amazing about it is that this sense of unity, this sense of standing together, we all now have a choice. What side of history do we want to be on? Are we going to join those forces of evil and endorse the axis of evil, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and all their proxies? Or are we going to be on the right side of history? Because Israel is the front line, but Israel is fighting for the entire free world. And Israel will not stop. And Israel will not lay down its weapons until we are safe. Because mark my words, and you know now because you guys just attacked, because you're beginning to understand that it's already here. Americans were attacked in Jordan, and everything else could either fall apart, or you can stand up and say, you know what, there is a price to be paid for trying to be evil in the world. And if we want to be on the right side of history and join the forces of light, we have to ensure that there is deterrence and understanding that there is a consequence to be paid. So it's lonely to be Jewish right now, but you know what? You can be very empowered. And while it's scary, and while people are drowning out what we're saying, we now have to stand up. And we cannot let evil be the forces that speak out. So don't be shy. Write a post, like a post, write to your representatives, put up billboards, and be the counterbalance to the forces of evil. Because if we let bullies bully, they win. But let me tell you, from personal experience, bullies only bully when there's nobody around to call them out. When you call them out, all of a sudden they're not so strong at being bullies anymore. And so we need to be as forceful as them, and we need to stand our ground, and we need to allow the silent majority to be not so silent anymore. Because if we don't speak out, and those who don't speak out become complacent and enable the powers of evil. So together we stand, Yachad Nenatzeach, we are united, and Am Yisrael is definitely Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Yasha Kol.